Whenever you're ready.
Good morning. The Finance Committee meeting is called to order at, I have 10:33 a.m., Wednesday, May 18th. All members are here, that being Alderwoman Finlayson to my right and Alderwoman O'Neill to my left. At this time, could I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Madam Chair, I'll move that we approve the agenda with the specifics FT 1122 and SA 2522 and SA 2622.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
At this time, do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the May 5th, 2022 Finance Committee meeting?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Okay, so we are going to go to the fund transfers. Bear with us because the committee just received them this morning, so we'll need to walk them through. What I have here is FT 11-22. It is a fund transfer, and it reads that it is going from the general fund contingency to planning and zoning, and this appropriation will pay for an outdoor dining pilot program. After the revision, $182,850 remains available in the contingency account. Who is here to speak to that?
So there's nobody from the department here to speak to that, but if you recall, the legislation that the council recently passed for the pilot program, for the outdoor dining pilot program.
The resolution?
I didn't say resolution. I don't know if it was an ordinance. I said legislation. I don't know if it was an ordinance or resolution. To support a pilot
R22.
outdoor dining program. Is it R2? Did you have a resolution number? Okay. Okay. And there, along with that was the study that was going to go along with that program, the pilot program. And this is the funding for the study.
Madam Chair, I'll move a favorable recommendation for FT 1122.
Second.
Do we have discussion?
Well, I'll make the point that since we passed the resolution, this is now allowing us to actually live up to the commitment we made in that resolution, which was to do a study. So this is the funding for it.
I'm sorry, I just don't remember there being a fiscal analysis to that resolution saying that it included $20,000 for a study. Did I miss that?
Madam Chair, it's attached to the resolution.
Yeah,
the
how does it?
Would you like for me to read it?
Yeah, read it, please.
It says the resolution approves a pilot program to study the use of private parking lots by restaurants after the end of the period of the city's emergency declaration. The city plans to hire a consultant, which will cost approximately $20,000.
Okay.
And that was signed by our budget analyst, Ms. Conley.
Yeah, I know. I think I voted. I think I know how I voted on it. Okay, I get it. Okay, it's on, no more discussion? Were you ready to vote? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 No. So the motion, favorable recommendation passes. All righty. The next is a supplementary appropriation 25-22, county grant revenue. This supplemental allocation appropriates $30,000 from the Anne Arundel County Development of Health to the No Harm Grant. This will allow the city to engage Cure Violence Global for an assessment and recommendations for implementing their violence prevention model. The $30,000 grant was not included in the fiscal year 2022 budget. No match is required.
Madam Chair, I'll move a favorable recommendation for SA 2522.
Second.
Any discussion? Questions?
I do have a question. I'm not sure if there's anybody who can answer it.
And this is about the
unfortunately.
particulars on what the funding is going to be used for. No, I cannot answer it, and Katie's just gone over to the office. This is from the CAO and the work that they did with the county. And we talked about it during the budget process, but I don't recall the specifics on what they're going to use the funding for.
So when we were dealing with it during the budget, they did not know they were getting this $30,000.
They were working with the county. If you remember, they said they were having a meeting with the county, they were going to look for some funding, and they would know more a few days after the time we had the meeting.
Was this the Office of Emergency, the Office of Emergency Management or the mayor's office?
The mayor's office. When you had the CAO in here, and, I'm sorry, the chief of staff, I'm calling her CAO, chief of staff and Adetola Ajayi in here. They were talking about this funding and meeting with the county to see how much they would be able to get this year.
Do you know whether this is timely for any reason? Because I made the motion because I wanted to open it for discussion, but
Right.
I would have no problem with postponing action on this until we have more understanding of the purpose.
I think
I second that
Ms. Connolly is going to look up some information
Yeah.
regarding the grant, see if we can, see if there's a time.
We have
A
a
time limit.
second, so, yeah. And I'll add that I think we would need someone from the mayor's office to speak to it.
I think Ms. Pettit was the one who said she was meeting with the county, so I guess maybe this came out.
And she was anxious, for us to present it today.
Second, yeah.
In a second.
Yeah.
Right, but I was going to, we have to kill that motion and then make a motion to
If
postpone.
Oh, gotcha.
the copy of the grant agreement that we have starts the term at June 1, which is why they wanted to get it heard today, because they can start spending the funds on June 1.
Well, could somebody run, I'm sorry.
She
Ms.
did, and there's nobody there.
Okay.
Well,
And this is going to be the last, I don't think, do we have another one in before June 1, have another finance committee meeting? I don't think we do.
well, when else, I mean, the finance committee, the
Has to
whole
hear-
council's gonna be together
On
on
Monday.
Thursday. That's a work session. Could we, well, we couldn't call a meeting, but that's tomorrow.
This is in line with our recommendations. I mean, that we were, in our recommendations, we addressed concern about responsibility and the management of these grants. So it's really important to the committee that we hear who is responsible for this grant and who is going to manage it. And I believe that's the reason why we want to hear from the mayor's office. Do you agree?
Yes, I do agree.
So the motion that's on the floor is to give a favorable recommendation. If we want to postpone it, then we have to kill that.
Yeah, can I have a motion to withdraw the?
No.
Do we have somebody
I'm calling the
coming?
question. We have to vote on the first one.
Katie, do we have somebody coming?
We have to vote it down.
From
Yes.
Michael Lyles is coming up.
From the law department?
Oh, Kate is with him?
Oh, okay.
Give me 1 second.
So let's leave it on the floor.
Okay.
So Ahmed, you would need to.
They're both on their way.
Eliminate this motion.
Will Are they coming right up?
Yes.
Okay. We'll wait. It's still on the floor, being seconded for discussion.
This is a new name I'm not familiar with, Cure Violence Global. I don't recall that name in our discussions.
Tola said it a couple of times, but never discussed exactly what it meant. I actually thought he was saying pure violence.
Yeah.
In my notes, it says pure violence. So.
Okay.
Kate, if you want to come up to the table and we'll get you up to speed here. If you want to identify yourself.
Good morning, Kate Pettit, Chief of Staff to Mayor Gavin Buckley.
Kate, on the floor, we've seconded for discussion a supplementary appropriation that we just received today, and it is from the County Department of Health to the No Harm grant, and it will allow the city to engage, quote, Cure Violence Global, end quote, for an assessment and recommendation for implementing their violence prevention model. And we do remember some mention of it during the Finance Committee meetings, but as per our recommendations, we just want to ensure that it's, who's accountable for it and what it's for and the terms of the grant, if you can speak to that.
Absolutely. So the No Harm program is the violence prevention program that the Mayor's office is initiating. There was a trial last year. And the Cure Violence is a model that's been developed and is in use in various cities and other jurisdictions around the country. It is in use in Baltimore. The model is one that uses community resources, including community agencies and the various partners who are all involved in, crime prevention, community services, all the related fields. And so Cure Violence has been identified by us and the county as a very good model for Annapolis. What the grant that's on the table now, I understand there is a first part, which is for this fiscal year, which is a $30,000 grant to allow us to bring Cure Violence in to run an assessment. The assessment will probably take place now, their dates are limited, so it actually probably will take place next year. So that's a new development that we only locked down the timeline yesterday. So it'll be in the next financial year, in July. So the assessment will take place over a week. The county is our partner in this, and so they are providing this grant funding to do it. We will bring together all the community stakeholders through the assessment. Cure Violence representatives will come in. They will speak to all the stakeholders, all of the parties and working groups on this, which is us, our group, and the county. And then they will provide recommendations for how to establish the model here in Annapolis. Once the recommendations come in, of course, we enter a new phase where we then will be applying to the county for a further grant that will actually fund the program. So the first part is just the assessment, and then there will be an grant application in the next financial year to fund implementation of the model. If everyone agrees, we have to go through this assessment and evaluation of how we're going to do that in Annapolis.
I don't, because we just received this, I don't have my notes from the budget review meeting, but how is No Harm VIP being funded now?
So I believe there was, there's no actual funding for the program. We had a trial that finished last year, and I would have to check how that was funded, whether it was funded directly from the Mayor's office or whether we were using some grant money, because this grew out of our opioid prevention program. And I'm not sure if some of that money was applied to start looking at the no harm model, the violence intervention model. I would have to check that for you, but that was a limited trial. It's over. There's no actual work on the ground on that at the moment, apart from trying to get this assessment in place.
But isn't there an event like this weekend, a No Harm VIP event?
No, that's where we get into the names again. I'm sorry, I know they're confusing. So that's our opioid intervention program. Naptown Anti-Dope Movement is running the
Naptown
community
Anti-Dope.
fair.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, you're right, it is kind of confusing.
Yeah, they're all very similar names, and
Okay.
yeah.
And who in the mayor's office is accountable for this grant?
So the grant, so Adetola Ajayi in the Mayor's office is the No Harm Program Coordinator, and I am working with him and Dr. Kalayana Rama and his team at the county. We had a working group meeting yesterday to lock down the time frame for the assessment. So that's where we're up to at the moment.
Any questions from my colleagues?
I do have a question. Going back to our budget deliberations, there were two amounts in the budget. I think one was 650,000, the other, I don't remember, 500 maybe, or 300.
500.
Is this connected to either of those grants?
So there is a relationship in that that money is for no harm. So the first part is this smaller grant to run the assessment. Then once we get through the assessment and the county signs off, we will apply for the larger grant from the county. And the figure was confusing because we had in the budget a $640,000 figure, but that was a 2-year figure. So I was able to clarify that, I think, when we met last time. So the initial 1-year figure for 2023 would be 370,000, I believe, that we'll be applying for.
So is that predicated on how we do on this survey, or is that guaranteed?
It's not guaranteed yet. It is partly to do with what we find out of the assessment and whether the county and the city are prepared to sign off that this is the right model, and we're ready to initiate that.
Okay, thank you.
So what you just said, as far as reduction in the grant that Alderwoman Finlayson mentioned, is that going to be reflected in the budget?
I believe so.
It sounds like there's an adjustment in the grant.
Katie needs a mic.
The question, I think, relates to the fact that in the budget we had initially a $640,000 figure that didn't align up to what we were expecting in 2023, and I found out that that was actually the 2-year figure. So we'd need to probably adjust that, but I'll let my finance colleagues answer to the actual adjustment.
So there's two options. If there's an amendment proposed during the budget process, we can reduce what's in the grant appropriations for that program. It is part of the grant fund. And we also talked about the fact that after the beginning of a fiscal year, the finance director has the authority to lower grant appropriations in line with what the actual grant award was. So therefore, we adjust our system, we don't overspend in accordance with the original estimate. So we could reduce it with an amendment, or we can just reduce the appropriation to the final award amount as we would for any grant.
I would think the latter, because it seems like it's still in flux.
If we haven't got a final figure, I would wait and do the latter.
But but approving this supplementary appropriation,
This is to get it started this year.
and it will
to get
go this year,
program
fiscal
this
year 2022. So this is real dollars coming in. Yeah. So I think there's, the motion I would look at is that I would be favorable of this subject to the $640,000 grant to be adjusted accordingly. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're understanding that that is in flux because of this study. It seems like we have these whole dollars of a grant, if you will, of 640. Am I right on the amount? We're winging this because it isn't in
The
front of
mayor's
us.
proposed budget that
Yes.
we are currently considering includes the $640,000 figure
Yep.
for the grant for '23.
Yep.
It appears that that's the amount they would need over 2 years, and for '23, they don't need the whole 640. So we can adjust that downward with an amendment as a part of the budget process, or the finance director, once we do get the final FY '23 award amount, I can adjust that downward myself to the actual award amount.
I'm not clear then, are you going to lower that figure now for the '23 budget?
No.
And then change it, or are you
No,
going to
it
leave it
would
at the
stay as it
640?
is for the '23 budget. And then after July 1, once we know the amount, I would lower it to the grant amount.
Okay, I thought I understood Ms. Pettit to say that she knows that in '23 it'll be 370,000?
So that's correct. That's what we have asked for in the first year of this program. The grant application, as I understand it, would actually be looking for a longer funding cycle. I'd need to clarify that exactly with the county, but I think adjusting the figure afterwards, once we know what the actual agreement will be, is a good way to go, because even if we're looking for only 370,000 in '23, we don't know exactly what will be approved in the grant yet. We could, even if we amended that figure now through an amendment, that might not be the figure that we come up with, depending on what the county chooses to fund and what the model recommends once we've done the assessment. So it makes sense to me that we would actually just adjust that through the finance director once the grant application is approved, which I would expect we will have that process underway and hopefully wrapped up by September.
So we are going to leave it at 640 and then adjust it down when the actual amount is revealed to us.
That's one option. You also have the option of adding, we could amend the budget on June 4th or whatever that Monday is, to reduce it to a lower amount. But
Would this 30,000 have to be added in some way, this essay?
So let's, we'll put this 30,000, if you give it favorable recommendation and the council passes it, we will add the 30,000 to the '22 budget. Now, if any of that amount is unspent or unencumbered at the end of the year, we would want to finish spending it next year. That could also be a part of that $640,000 amount that's sitting there too. So you might have some of this left over to spend at the beginning of next year, and that 640 would allow for that as well.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, if I may, that makes sense, because now we know that Cure Violence will not finish their assessment before July. We were hoping we could get this done in June, so that flexibility that the finance director has just outlined would be, ideal for us to allow to finish the assessment as it's going to carry over into July now.
Yeah, it seems like the only real dollars that we know about right now is this assessment. And sorry, what's troubling, and I know we discussed this, is that where this $640,000 number came from, which is now a 2-year something that we're just going to keep there. The viability of it is questioned. You know what I mean? It's like, where did this number come from that now we're talking it's 370 or whatever? It's just a kind of a mystery, but I guess that's all history. It's in the budget as $640,000. Question.
So my recollection is that we did discuss
Yeah.
the possibility of changing that down when we found out it was 2 years. And then I'm taking back my other questions.
Madam Chair, you're quite right. There is history around this, which, so I apologise again that I don't know the exact terms of the larger grant and what that will be. I know that the county is very supportive of us getting this program up and running, and as I understand it from the former Chief of Staff, Susie Smith, she put in a 2-year grant figure when she submitted the budget. So that is not the amount we understand we'll be using in 2023. But because we don't actually know what the figure will be and what the county will approve for 23, adjusting that, in the new fiscal year is the approach that makes sense to me. Of course, that's your decision to just.
It seems like we have it in as, and I know we discussed this in our concern, but we have it in as sort of a placeholder for $640,000 for 2 years. But I think we've already talked about this being, you don't put that much money in the budget unless you know what it's for. And it sounds like this was sort of estimated as a grant to get, because we didn't secure a grant for $640,000. We applied for a grant estimating that it would be for $640,000. Now we're approving $30,000 to assess what we actually will need, because we haven't defined a program yet. So we're definitely chicken before the eggs here.
Madam Chair, as I understand it, when departments are submitting their budgets and putting in grants and what they expect grants to be, that's often before they know and before the applications are written. So they are based on best estimates. I don't know why the 2-year figure was put forward as is, but the program is the grant money will primarily go towards employing the people, the community service workers on the ground that we will need to deliver the program. So that's why it's a significant figure. There will be a network of community workers delivering the No Harm Violence Prevention program. That's where the main cost comes. But yes, we still have to work through the details of the grant process with the county.
And don't misunderstand me, grants are good. They're good. I just, I think I still would entertain a motion that if we approve this money for fiscal year 2022, that we have a caveat of some sort that then we will adjust the $640,000 grant accordingly once we have defined this program with the stakeholders.
And Madam Chair, I made the motion to give a favorable recommendation to this $30,000. I would rather we not confuse it with the full grant. This is a survey in preparation for the next step, which is the bigger grant.
Yeah.
So I would rather we keep this $30,000 separate and apart, give permission for them to move forward with the survey, and then they will come back to us with the complete grant request that will encompass 370 or 400 or 600, whatever the end numbers tend to be. But I'd rather we not mix the two, if you don't mind.
And we're on record accordingly, so we don't need the motion to incorporate us. So do I have a second?
It was already seconded.
Oh.
So we're ready for the vote, Madam Chair.
Did you just joke? I'm out of practice here. Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Okay, so you have a favorable recommendation to proceed on this.
And thank you for running up here.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
answer our questions.
Yeah.
Thank you for your patience waiting for me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Alrighty, so this is, the next item is Supplementary Appropriation 26-22 for $305,000. This is appropriates $305,000 from the Hillman Garage revenue that was collected in excess of the budget due to the garage operating longer than anticipated. And this will allow the city to pay for the SP Plus expenses that exceed the budget due to Hillman Garage operating longer than anticipated. Who's able to speak to that?
I will speak to that.
Madam Chair, could we put a motion on the floor to
Okay,
allow
just
for
want to make sure we
discussion?
didn't have to run and get anybody.
I'll make a motion to give a favorable recommendation to 2622.
Second.
Okay, so
Discussion.
yeah, I will explain what this is about. When we set the budget at the beginning of the fiscal year for the parking fund, we have the revenues equal to or sometimes exceeding the expenses we anticipate. When we had anticipated that the garage would be closed earlier, we reduced the revenue estimates on this side. We also reduced the expenses that we anticipated we would be paying SP Plus. So the budget appropriations for SP Plus's services are now not high enough to finish paying them for the year. But on this side, we've collected a lot more revenue than we had budgeted for Hillman because it was open longer. So we need to provide a budget appropriation on the expense side so we can finish paying them out the year.
Because we always, the budget now does reflect, the budget, the fiscal year 2023, does it reflect the increased revenue? Yes, right?
FY '23,
The budget, the
the
budget.
proposed mayor's budget for FY '23,
Yes.
the Hillman garage will be closed for the full year.
So it does not
This is
include
going to update the FY '22 budget.
for both revenue and expenditure side?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Every time we want to increase the total budget expense, the appropriation, we have to say what the revenue source is. And we are paying for this increase with the increased revenues
Right.
from Hillman this year.
Right. The reason why I asked that question is that the statement was made by the city manager that, that this happened. And so I assumed that it was reflected in the budget. But I understand now that we have to have this supplementary appropriation.
For '22, so we can
22
finish
to reflect
paying
that.
SP Plus for '22.
Yeah. So it is still good news.
Yes, yes. It's just giving us the spending authority to pay those bills.
Any more discussion?
Nope, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, we can vote on it then. All in favor of a favorable recommendation signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All righty. That's good news. Okay, we have legislation to discuss. It's Resolution 31-22, which is a position classification and pay plan. And this basically approves the fiscal year 2023 position classifications and their respective pay plan and specify an effective date.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to give a favorable recommendation for R 3122.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, it's on the floor for discussion. Is anyone, yeah, okay.
So Ms. Hopkins is here, she can speak to this, but just to give you some updates, because the union negotiation process is not complete yet. Normally, this legislation would have in it the pay scales, the new pay scales, and all the new positions that are in the FY '23 proposed mayor's budget. As it's drafted, I understand it has the current pay scales there because they have not yet been updated. And I don't think all the positions are in there yet, right?
Ms. Hopkins, could you move to the mic?
Yeah, so I'll have her explain what's in there. Right now, it's, the resolution was introduced so we can amend it once that information is available.
So we've created a placeholder, essentially.
Well, okay. Because I think it's either the staff report or the other attachment says that it is the same as fiscal year 2022. But when you speak of a placeholder in the budget, does it reflect, what does that placeholder reflect?
What we're trying to do
Yep.
is continue negotiations, complete our work to actually bring forward, when those negotiations are complete and voted on by the membership, the results of collective bargaining, as well as the administration's intention with regard to non-represented employees. We have to have something for FY23. We had to have something for introduction. So we have literally given you the same pay scale and the same position summary listing until we get through those elements so that we can continue to pay people when we get to FY23, should we, for some unforeseen result, not get finished in time for the budget process. We don't expect that to be the case, but since we needed to provide you something by now, we have moved forward with essentially holding steady what we have. That doesn't mean there aren't budget appropriations and we're not continuing our good labor work. It just means that we need to give you something that is part of the budget.
Well, I speak to it because the Finance Advisory Commission's report, which we're going to talk about later, addresses this as an exposure in our budget, and that's basically questioning the budget being done before these negotiations are final. And my understanding is that in the budget, we have addressed possibly the financial impact of these negotiations, if I'm not mistaken. Is that my understanding?
There is a placeholder amount in the general fund budget and in the other funds as well to try to estimate where the funding that would be needed to honor whatever comes from the negotiation process.
Okay.
Now, and at the time we had to have this ready for council, which was at the beginning of April, that was an estimate.
Got it.
So there is a dollar figure there to try to approximate at that time what we thought, an amount that we thought might support what we're doing. So until we're done with that process, we can't give you pay tables, we can't give you the new positions until that's done. And I think this is here to say, this is what would hold if we ended up not having that in time for the budget process that you're doing currently.
Any questions?
Yes, thank you. Traditionally, and maybe just in other settings, if negotiations are not finished by end of fiscal year, then the current negotiated agreement rolls over.
Correct.
Is that not the case here?
So what we would have to get legally, what we should be doing with the bargaining units is establishing a letter of continuance with them if we're not finished in the terms and agreements that we're trying to mutually come to a place on. I have worked in government my entire career. I have seen this so many times. You may even get to July 1st and you still don't have a bargaining agreement. There are many jurisdictions that go through this as well. That doesn't mean there isn't a good faith effort to reach agreement. It just may be some other unforeseen conditions that impact that. Or holding firm, you know, from one side or the other. But you want to make sure that you have provisions for that. We have a process we're trying to follow here, which is honorably putting before you something that shows that that's what we would commit to at a minimum. And we're talking minimums here because clearly we're negotiating in good faith to provide pay increases for employees through FY23. But position classification, there are proposed positions in the budget that are going to affect civil service positions. There's a process that needs to be gone through for that as well. And so what you get in the position summary is the end result of having been through the Civil Service Board review and presentation and approval before it's part of the position summary. So we knew full well going into this that we will have changes, we will have amendments, but at least you know what the base is.
Well, I'm still not clear because the basis is what exists today.
Correct.
Right, which is
So-
what would be, if we didn't complete the process, that's what we would do.
Exactly.
We would be carrying those current tables into the new year.
So why do we need this? I'm still not clear why we need this if we can just roll over what exists today.
I was advised, and maybe this is something the Office of Law really needs to speak to, I was advised that I needed to provide
A pay
a
plan.
pay plan and a position summary as part of the budget process.
In this budget section of the code, and it talks about the introduction of the budget, it has to be accompanied by a piece of legislation with the pay plan.
Okay.
Yeah, and only for that reason, because Alderman Finlayson clearly, in the collective bargaining process, that's what we want to use as the method to get to agreement, not us coming forward and saying, well, this is the pay plan. That's really not, I don't want it characterized that way whatsoever. We're really, as Jody was saying, we're really just trying to get before you that which we're legally required to do in order to put forth the appropriate documentation for budget consideration.
Well, Ms. Dickinson's reference to the code satisfies my question.
Okay.
One of the recommendations or one of the concerns from the fact was the fact that we're kind of revealing our hand to the bargaining units by, putting placeholders in the budget and then again by such resolution. So that's just, making a statement.
We don't want to characterize that way at all.
Right. That's how, that's their interpretation.
It's not.
Well, and we know that these are very unique times with COVID. We had changed code language to say that we needed to be finished bargaining by, it used to be January. And then it moved to February. I think it's March now, but circumstances don't allow.
So part of the challenge is, and I can speak to this from a labor relations experience side, you need to know what you have in order to bargain. And so that's a lot of end of year information. There's a lot of financial information that is important to have for consideration before you even know what position you can take. And our bargaining unit teams want calendar year information. So basically what people have, so there's a lot of economic data that goes into that consideration, and it's very difficult to do when you're really not through the evaluation of that data and don't have your regular documentation that can be easily referred to, easily accessible, transparent, consistent, and above all else available for review. And so with changing the budget process, I think it just puts us in this situation more, I think you're going to see it more often than not, because it's just responsible to complete your negotiations with all parties at the table and know that this is the time we have. We're not going to rush you. We're going to make sure that everybody is on the same page before we get to final signature on a document and something that we feel is clearly going to be the outcome and will be reflected in these pay tables and elsewhere.
Well, I'm going to ask a question about the table, but before I do, I'm going to make a comment. When we did interest-based bargaining, which started, I guess, in 2010, 2011, we finished and ratified in 2013. It took us 13 months to negotiate those contracts, and it was to the benefit of everyone, and our employees received a 10% pay raise over that 3-year period, but they had sat for 9 years without pay raises. So it took a long time for us to share all the information, share the need and the will of the community to get us there, but it paid off in a big way. And so, I'm always the advocate for interest-based bargaining. So that's just my comment. Looking at the attachment, you have several positions that are highlighted.
That they shouldn't be.
Okay.
They shouldn't be.
Okay,
The
so that's-
document should not have had any highlights. Those were highlighted because those were positions that during prior resolutions were the changes.
Okay,
So
I thought we
it's
already
meaningless.
had these, but I,
If you want, I can send you a clean one for review. I sent it also to be replaced on the attachment, a clean one that doesn't have any highlights on it, so.
I think that might be helpful. We understand
Yeah.
because you
Yeah.
just explained it. but
Before
the
it gets
rest
to the
of our
council, we'll
colleagues
make
might-
sure it's the clean
Yeah.
version.
Yeah.
Thank you for
So-
that, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Alderwoman Finlayson, because I thought something changed until I read the attachments that it hadn't. But I'm trying to reconcile the code, 3.32.110, with review of the union contracts. It does speak to, well, I'll just read it. It says the city council may not vote on the ratification of any collective bargaining agreement between the city of Annapolis and any labor union until the director of finance has prepared and submitted to the city council a fiscal impact notes addressing the annual cost, basically what is the impact. So with that, what is the path forward if we approve this, or not approve, but if we make a favorable recommendation that, okay, this is sort of a, I don't know what it is. It's sort of a, okay, we got something. We got something. So we're moving forward. Okay, so then the union negotiations are complete. There's a impact to the pay, to the classifications of some sort. Then what is the procedure? And this, I'm assuming then that this doesn't happen until after the budget is approved?
So,
Or what, that's kind of concerning.
no, so your budget is now being approved on the 10th, right?
Yes.
June 10th.
Yes.
So this is new for me too. If we get a union approval for one or more of the unions approve the agreements and the council approves the union agreements, I don't know what the process, what goes first. I mean, we're on,
So, can I offer?
yeah.
Okay, so when we reach our final negotiation stance, and the union has accepted the draft document, they take it to their membership for a vote. The membership approves, then we have an agreement. Then we get our draft document, our draft union agreement, whichever union that unions, plural those are signed off. That is now officially our final outcome and puts the finance office in a position to then provide the staff report, the financial report that goes with the cost of that negotiation. Now we have an A scale, a P scale, and an F scale. Our general scale, our police scale, and our fire scale. We would, after negotiations, have a better idea what the outcome would be for each of those scales as well, because we have had a history of adjusting the entire scale, which includes non-represented employees, on the basis of what has been collectively bargained, sometimes with a little variation, but pretty close to that. And so that information would come through in the staff report, the fiscal note for the.
And you did speak to that this is common, but again, being new to me as well, I think it's kind of unfortunate that this doesn't all happen before the June 10th approval of the budget.
So any amendment that's going to affect this piece of legislation or the budget legislation will have to be considered on the 4th, the 6th, Monday the 6th
Of June.
of June.
So it is your goal to have this all before the June 10th
So-
approval?
Yes, it's a goal.
Yes, it's a goal. Yes.
Okay.
I will say it is a goal that's coming up pretty quickly. And if, for instance, we were completed with the process for one or two of the groups, and then we would bring those to you in amendments for the June 6th meeting. We would propose the amendments at that time. So and I don't know how quickly these things are going to wrap up because we're at different stages with different groups.
Yes, go ahead.
So if I'm understanding correctly, this is the pay scale that we're putting forward right now, keeping it in the budget, the current pay scale. If you have changes or have come to agreements with any groups, on the 4th, we will know about it. But otherwise, this is the pay scale. And does this last for all of 2020, FY 2023? Or do we come back in August when they've finalized and make amendments?
So we will present to council anything that would happen after that date. As soon as we have it available, we would present it. The approval, because of the timing, the approval may not happen until July. Council's approval may not happen until July, and we would be amending the FY '23 budget for the respective changes. Whoever didn't meet that deadline, those amendments would come to you as a budget amendment, likely after July 1. Because there's only one more meeting in June after that point, so we would have to introduce it, and it has to go through the public hearing process and everything, so it would likely happen in July, and we would try to get those in effect in July. And like I say, that's hopefully the outside time frame. I don't know if it's plausible something could get hung up even longer, and we just have to decide at the time. We'd have to come back to you with a budget amendment to amend the FY '23 budget, if needed, on the dollar amounts. Remember, we already have a placeholder in there
Right.
of a certain amount that was to cover everything, and how that, compares to what's actually settled, we'll know once the agreements are approved.
So the budget can be reduced or increased.
Right. I'm trying to look in the code desperately for some kind of a deadline for negotiations. Has this happened before? Where we have to put a placeholder in because we don't have.
I've only been here for 4 years. I wasn't part of the last process, and
No, we were complete the last time.
Yeah.
It happened when we were doing interest-based bargaining.
and I know that for some issues, there was a placeholder amount, but I don't know if it had anything to do with the union negotiations. There was some unsettled provision that we were holding a pot of money for, but it was a small bit of money that we later distributed to the individual accounts.
Yeah, it's probably something that probably should come up with the finance committee review of the budget, a parking lot issue that we should probably look at some kind of deadline, because I think this is sort of unfortunate, because it could go, as Alderwoman O'Neill said, it could go ahead.
There is language in the budget
Where?
in
the code
that says negotiations should be finished by the first week of March. I'm not sure where it is,
I know,
but
that's what I'm looking.
it's there.
Okay.
And recently someone included it in some document, probably from the fact. But this is an anomaly. This happens once in a while. Sometimes at the end of the process, we're at impasse and no one agrees.
Yeah.
And so what exists simply rolls over. There are times when, as I mentioned, and Jody just mentioned, Ms. Dickinson, I'm sorry, when we were doing interest-based, it took us 13 months. So it wasn't within a year that we were able to agree to the changes. So we went back and had to amend the budget. Ms. Dickinson has put in the budget, they call them placeholders, but there's a pot of money there to cover what we hope will be the negotiations. Okay, if all of that is not utilized, then that goes into contingency. Am I correct?
We don't have a plan for that yet, because
Okay.
we're not at the point to know if it's too high, too low, you know what. It was just the best estimate at the point of time.
But there will be a plan for that, and if.
Yeah,
it's-
we'll decide at the time what we do if there was excess.
Yes, and if it's not enough, then that's up to us to figure out whether we want to uphold what happened in negotiations. Heaven forbid we're in that, in that position. But this is not a catastrophe. It happens in bargaining
Yeah.
all the time.
It's not highly irregular. And it
Exactly.
is something that organizations have been dealing with for a very long time. As I said earlier, you do the best you can with the direction that you're going in. You want agreement. You want people to feel settled in the final outcome. So what's more important is that you have agreement, and that what you end up with in the final assessment of all of this is the parties coming together, and that the membership is adopting what the bargaining team has determined are the terms. And then you implement them. And that's not to say that the financial piece of this is insignificant. We know that a pretty significant part of the budget is reflected in our personnel costs, which is employee costs. But I just want to really help you understand that the goal of agreement is really what you're trying to do in labor negotiations. And the implementation of that certainly has financial ramifications, but it also has operational ramifications. It's how this city operates with the labor of its employees that we're talking about here. And making sure that we are able to put forward something that is reasonable and helps support and retain and, reward our employees, so that we have a very robust and amazing city government to meet the needs of our citizens. So I hope I'm helping reassure you that this process isn't broken and isn't terribly out of whack, but that what we're doing is important to allow us to get to the point where we can then bring back to you something that looks different from what you see right here. We will. And it's important that the messaging around this is not us failing to want to come to the table and resolve this for our employees, and that this is it. This is what we're putting forward. That is not what is the messaging at all here. We are only trying to meet what's the code necessity here for giving you documents that are part of the budget.
I'd like to say something I've said many, many times, and that is that we are a service organization, and we don't have a widget that we're designing or distributing or creating, but we have a product, and that's our city services. And so our employees are extremely important because they are the ones who provide that service. And so bargaining is significant because it is an ability to share with us the employees' feelings and needs and desires, and vice versa. And hopefully at the end of the day, interest-based is win-win bargaining. Everybody walks away happy. Everybody isn't going to get everything they want, and it's not all about salary, far from it. There are a lot of other items that are negotiated in these agreements. Many of them, that's true, have fiscal impacts, but many things do not. But through interest-based, we walked away with such a collaborative relationship with all four of the unions. And I think that has carried over till today. It's not adversarial. You don't have police officers preparing to picket, as we did at one time 15 years ago. But it is a very collaborative, collegial process that happens to have a financial impact for everybody in the city. But more than that, it's the services that we provide to the residents. So that's my words of advice to us, that we want to maintain that relationship. And we should start bargaining in October. That used to be the practice some time ago. And then you can finish by January or February, hopefully. And then the budget used to be presented in March. It's now presented in April. So we have an extra month there. But we need to start planning. The council needs to start planning in September what we would like to, how we would like to implement our vision for the city, our mission for the city, through the people who provide the services. So we should put that in our notes to remind us in September to get ready for bargaining in October.
Yeah, and what that, it might involve a code reference. Regardless, I think this discussion is warranted, based on the recent recommendation letter we got from the Finance Advisory Commission. So I'm glad we're speaking to it and the importance to it. Just factually, what union negotiations are still continuing? They're not all, right? Is that my?
They're not all, but
Okay.
I'd like to hold that until.
Yeah, you don't have to, that all or whatever is what I needed to know. And so that we all understand what is before us is just something that we need to do.
Yeah, and I just want to also say publicly, we're coming on we're still in COVID, right?
Yeah, right.
There's a lot of there's just different elements that were necessary to evaluate and try to forecast and try to bring into this process. So I just need to say that out loud.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And that was based on what we heard from our staff during the presentations. We heard new words or in the context of budget review, like, trauma and post-pandemic and cancer and health and training and all of those things that are, are new things that we have to deal with. And I'm sure that that's part of it. So I get all that. And I wish you success in your final negotiations. Are there any more questions or discussion on what is before us? And I think we have a second. And so at this, I think we're ready to vote. All in favor for a favorable recommendation of the table before us? Say aye.
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 Okay. So we do have a favorable recommendation on the attachment. R30, what is the number?
3122.
R3122, right, R3122. The position classification and pay plan, which for the record is no different than fiscal year 2022 at this point. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So at this point, we have a general discussion from our finance director, Jody Dickinson. Hello. You have the
Is
floor.
this in reference to
It just
my
says-
yeah. I typically do an update to talk about what we're doing in the
Yep.
finance department. It's obvious that a lot of the time is being taken up by the budget process
Yes.
and the related meetings with the finance committee. And then we are now considering the amendments. We're summarizing the amendments that have been proposed by the council and getting those drafted for our meeting, which I believe is next week, right? Next Thursday, the 26th. The P3 deal is also being finalized. The concession agreement, part of that deal is being finalized. And that's taking up a bit of time, the union negotiations as well. Otherwise, in the department, we are heading towards year end and trying to get the records reconciled, et cetera, for year end, and addressing our year end payroll procedures and our year end purchasing cutoff procedures. And one other thing.
When is that, Director Dickinson? When is the cutoff for fiscal year?
So we set it at this time every year, and the memo hasn't gone out yet. So I'll be working with the purchasing staff to establish the time frame and deadlines for people for departments to put purchase orders in the system and to get items paid before year end.
And what about supplementary appropriations and fund transfers for fiscal year 2022? Are those, they have no?
So those are, as departments come to us for changes, new grants, et cetera, we are limited by the time that you will meet. So anything that's going to be considered for FY22 has to be voted on in the council the last meeting of June, no later.
Okay.
Right? So then that means it has to get to Finance Committee, the meeting before that. Your meeting immediately before the last meeting. Otherwise, they can't be considered. We can't update the budget for those requests. I don't process FY22 budget adjustments after June 30.
So this is, unless we have an emergency meeting, today is the last Finance
today.
Committee. Is it?
No, you would have one before the last meeting of June.
Okay.
We're not in June yet.
This is May, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
so there is still a window of time to receive those.
The other thing that we're dealing with is we're doing an interview. We have a procurement officer candidate we're going to be interviewing. We're still working on trying to fill our open positions.
Okay.
What else? I think I'm forgetting something important, but it'll come to me. One of the many things. Oh, the RFP. So we put an RFP out, request for proposal for audit services for FY22, and we have 4 responses, and we're going to be analyzing those in the next couple of days and making a recommendation to the audit committee.
That's great.
That's it. That was the thing I was trying to think of.
Okay. I have a question, and I was going to ask it during the amendment, the next budget meeting with the council, but, so we have well, let's get now. The amendments are all in, I guess, you've got them, and we have this one-time expense allocation, $1.1 million plus change, whatever, right? One-time expense.
I'm not sure where the 1.1 million number is coming from. The one-time reserve monies that we are projecting to be available at the end of this year.
Yes.
Was 6 million something, but in the FY23 proposed budget,
Yes.
the mayor's budget utilizes some of that.
Yes.
2.7 million, something like that. 2.7, 2.8 million of that's programmed in the FY23 budget. So there are several amendments that you know of that from the council that are requesting to tap some of that one-time reserve as well.
Right.
And I don't know what that total is yet. We haven't taken a look and scheduled them and seen what that total is. In addition, it's possible that some of the union agreements might involve some use of the one-time monies.
I think it may not be a misunderstanding, but I just want to be clear that when we submit amendments and we're saying take it out of the one-time, the terminology we're using is reserve.
Reserve for one-time uses.
Yeah, okay. Another way of asking that is how much do we have in it for that? Because my understanding is that we have what you say a fund balance, but X dollars goes into budget stabilization, X dollars goes into the capital reserve, which leaves us a remainder, which is assigned to one-time expense or a non-recurring expense.
So,
And that figure we had in our finance report as
Right.
the $1.1 million. So I'm interpreting that.
So I'm not, you have to point to me what you're talking about with the 1.1 million. If you look at the proposed budget book for '23, we have a fund balance schedule. Katie, which page is that on? Page 20 in the proposed budget book has a depiction and a schedule of where we think those different pots of money are going to be at the end of '22, and then at the end of '23. And that's based on my FY '22 projections that we did back in January.
Right.
So that number might be a little bit different.
Yeah.
Based on what we did at the time, it would end '22 with $6.2 million. But some of that was, like I said, some of it was programmed in the mayor's budget. So I don't know where the 1.1 is coming
Yeah,
from.
I don't know if we're communicating.
Yeah, maybe not.
I know, understand that the year is not complete, but we have an unreserved general fund balance of X dollars, and from that X dollars, we appropriate X to the budget stabilization fund, Y to the capital reserve fund, and then we're
So
left with.
you're talking about, at the end of '22, I am projecting that we will have some funding to distribute
Yes,
to those reserves.
Yes.
And 1.1 million is the amount, 1,179,000.
Yes.
Is the amount that will be added to the reserve for one-time uses, added to it for the year. I project, even without that addition, I project that the balance would be at 5.3 million. Then we add the 1.1, which comes to that $6 million number that I was stating. So I think you're pulling from, that's the extra amount that we're putting in there at the end of '22.
So what is that amount? Taking away the 2.7 that the mayor has?
And then as you roll it forward and take away the 2.797, it's actually closer to 2.8 million. The ending balance at the end of '23 would be 3,748,000.
if we're holding to the 15% requirement, right? Of our reserves, is it fiscally responsible to say that that is all being used for one-time expense?
No, the 15% number that you're referring to is the top line in that schedule, which is anticipated to be $16.6 million, and we're not,
Okay.
we're not,
And then you do the
touching
math
them.
and you
Yeah.
do
yes.
budget, da, da, da,
You
da,
do the math, you determine what that 15% has to be.
Right.
And then anything over and above, I project it's going to be higher. So anything over and above that 15%, we distribute to those other reserves.
Correct. Correct. Okay. And right now, so do you have that in front of you, what those
Yes.
numbers are?
I got the budget book page in front of me, page
Okay.
20.
Okay. So I think what we wrote in our report is misleading. Well, we do say it will be added to the fund balance,
Yeah.
assigned to one, I guess that language is
1.1
correct.
is added.
It's added. We do have the word added. Okay. 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 So when these requests come in, you're tallying it up against that.
Yeah, so I would be tallying it against the $3.7 million because the mayor's budget already proposes to use $2.8 million of it. So I would be tallying those requests against the 3.7
Yep.
and any other uses that would result from negotiations, tapping those one-time funds.
Okay. Got it. I'm being super, super conservative. Okay. Go ahead.
May I share some information? In the Environmental Matters Committee meeting last week, we had a presentation from Chief Romelli, Fire Chief, and he shared with us some pretty startling information about the foam that they use and the turnout gear that they wear that has a strong propensity to create cancer. And so we proposed an amendment using one-time revenue to replace the foam that they use and to replace, I don't think it was all of their turnout gear, because once they wear it into a fire, they can't wear it again until it's been laundered. So they need more than one piece of, more than one outfit. Anyway, so I think our amendment was about 750,000. So I'm sharing that with you just so that you'll be prepared. I have not.
I got it, yes, I have a sense that if I total up all the council's requests and tapping the one-time funds, it's going to be well in excess of what's left over. So, there other council members have also submitted high dollar amendments. So it can't all be approved. There's not enough funding for it. So that's something the council's going to have to work through during your amendment process, because there simply won't be enough to cover the request.
Well, and we also have amendments from the Finance Committee that are included in that lot. I would hope that we would categorize our amendments into, and I'm not sure what, but potentially, public safety, human, and, I'm not sure, but I think we should come up with some categories so that we can make sure that we're living up to the mission and vision that we have for the city.
So as we accumulate these on a schedule, and we will be drafting them and we will be discussing them next Thursday. Is it next Thursday or 2 weeks?
Monday, the 6th.
The 26th of May, we're going to be discussing.
The 26th, there's a work session where
okay.
we're going to start talking about all the proposed amendments. And we can include in that schedule, public safety, a function that you're trying to address, some kind of issue.
Will they be,
So we put those in the order that we received them.
okay, the ones that came from committees,
Is that
will they
first?
be
Finance
separated
committee
out
first?
in any form?
So those would be,
Well, we had some from the Finance Committee, and now we have from Environmental Matters. I don't know what the other committee, they didn't do any?
You didn't do it in the committee.
What, you're talking about finance?
No. Environmental matters. Did it
Oh.
outside of committee.
But we agreed to sponsor it together. So, for example, the firefighters, we didn't do it in committee is what Ms. Green is saying. We didn't take a position, but we did request the amendment, and both Alderman Savage and I are sponsoring it.
And I think Alderman Arnett, yeah.
Alderman Arnett was not here for that meeting.
It was an email he asked to be co-sponsor.
we have it in our list of amendments submitted by individual council members. So I'm not sure if it came from you or from Alderman Savage,
Okay, I think we
but
probably both
it's on the list.
But anyway, it's in, I just didn't know how it was going to be delineated, that's all.
So there's Katie Conley, budget analyst. What I've done thus far is, again, what Jody mentioned, that whoever submitted the amendment first, that's on my list first, right? So I would, in that case, if you submitted an amendment and then Alderman Savage has the same one, I'd reach out to him and say, hey, Alderwoman Finlayson had it in first, would you like to co-sponsor this one?
Okay, thank you. Sorry to make more work for you.
This is, to agree with the Finance Advisory Commission, this is a perfect example of prioritizing, and how do we prioritize unless we have a citywide strategic plan? Is it cancer prevention? Is it healthcare? Is it public safety? Otherwise, I agree with Alderman Finlayson. It's obviously it's not first come, first serve. There should be a way of categorizing these, when we discuss them, and maybe we can do that while we're discussing them. But what is missing is what are our priorities, and I'm a firm believer with the Finance Advisory Committee that without a strategic plan and have some kind of consensus of those priorities, we're, kind of, I hate use the word aimless, but anyways, that is just my thoughts. And thank you for that. I from seeing the numbers come in, I knew that was the case, that we were over already. Okay.
Madam Chair, in the Finance Committee's or the facts report, they believe that we do have a strategic plan that was created a number of years ago.
It's about 10 years old.
2012.
Yeah. And so maybe that is something that we should
That's
revisit.
something that we're currently actually working on, working towards, is updating that strategic plan. It's been discussed, and we have a plan to move forward, so that's already in process.
So maybe at the beginning of our meeting on the 26th, we should be reminded of what our mission and our vision is for the city.
Yes, and as we update that, there might be some tweaks to that. I mean,
yeah.
so,
It should be changing. It shouldn't be static. You know, it should change as the city changes and the needs change and all of that.
Yeah.
But while we're talking about
Absolutely.
the fact, or at least I am, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the facts report that was distributed to us
Yesterday.
this week, I guess.
Yeah, do we have an exact reference to it, the date? I guess that's easy to find.
Yesterday was the
Was it dated yesterday?
Well, we can simply say it was their report in reference to the
they gave it,
FY23
they
budget.
presented it, they distributed it to the administration yesterday morning.
So yesterday, if we need a date.
I don't know if that's the formal date on the
May
report.
17th, okay.
hang on a second.
Okay.
It was
Was that
actually, yes, it was dated May 7th.
May 17th? So was that an
So the
amendment?
motion is that we accept the report that the FAC sent us, Financial Advisory Commission sent us on May 17th.
Mr. Lyles?
Second.
Yes, ma'am. I think you want to receive the report
Right.
because if you're saying you accept the report, it may be seen that you're accepting what's in it. You can decide that, but it seems like you're trying to just receive the report.
Okay.
And that may be your motion.
I don't quite agree, but I will.
You can do it however you
know.
want, but I think there is a legal difference
I
between
will.
accepting the report and its terms and recommendations versus just we've gotten it, we've received it, and it goes into the record.
Okay, then the motion, and it was seconded, right? So I'll amend my own motion. Oh,
I didn't know if you were.
she didn't hear a second, so it's all
Yeah.
good. So the motion,
Okay.
the motion is that we received the Finance Advisory Commission's report on May 17th.
Yeah.
I'll second.
That was second.
All right, so it's on the floor, seconded. So yeah, we're acknowledging receipt of the recommendation. So all in favor signify by saying A of acknowledgement of receipt.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And thank you, Finance Advisory Commission, if you're listening, because it was a topic, it did create some topics of discussion today and will continue to do so. So that, I think we've completed the agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Now that we've adjourned, Mr. Lyles, were you here